You are listening to the Dare to Love podcast with your hosts, Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, founders of LoveWorks.
I've had the privilege of working with hundreds and thousands of couples in breakdown and relationship who are doing their very best to deal with complex problems, issues, breakdowns in relationship. And today I'm going to be talking about one of the common pitfalls that I watch couples fall into. And that is what I am calling this, I'm calling for this podcast, the peril of generalizing. We all know that place when we are in the middle of something that we don't like and something we don't want. And as it is happening, we are beginning to see that this is a pattern. And as we see the pattern of it, we speak in terms of what is going on as a generalization. All right, take two, add two. I'm looking forward to being with you here on this podcast. This podcast is called The Perils of Generalizing. I have had the privilege of working with hundreds and thousands of couples in relationship who are navigating some pretty complex issues and have some complex and complicated problems and breakdowns that they're attempting to address in relationship. Sometimes those problems are actually pretty simple, but when the things we do to try to resolve our conflicts and get ourselves back into harmony are also often the very things that make things worse in our relationship and actually prevent us from resolving conflicts. So see if you can see yourself here in this, some of these examples I'm about to give. When we are in conflict, it is very easy for us to generalize and to make statements like these. You never help me around the house. I always have to do everything myself around here. We never have sex anymore. I'm really tired of being in a relationship with somebody who doesn't value intimacy and sex. You never take responsibility for your side of the street. You're always blaming me for everything. You know, I am sick of being the only one who initiates working on the relationship. I want to be with somebody who actually wants to work on the relationship and make things better. You are such a hypocrite. See yourself in any of those examples? It is very common for us to generalize when we feel triggered, hurt, or angry. Unfortunately, there are many problems with this habit that I'm going to be talking about here in this podcast. Now, let's talk first of all about this pattern and how it comes to be, right? So you might notice that when something happens that you don't want or something happens that you don't like in relationship, let's say your partner doesn't keep an agreement or says no to a request or a need that you have, or blatantly goes against something you have asked for in the past, something that you have shared with your partner that really means a lot to you, and here they are acting as if they never heard you say anything about it in the first place. When something like that happens, you might notice that your mind instantly remembers all of the other times when you felt something similarly. It's like our mind gets instantly flooded with all of these memories from the past when we had a similar experience. And we actually replay those in our mind, right? We replay all of those other times, and it becomes kind of this general soup, right? This negative loop, I kind of call it, where we kind of get caught up in this circle of negativity as we're remembering all of these other times when we felt similarly, and we're lumping it all in together with this current experience. There are usually a lot of old beliefs attached to these past memories, these past experiences, old beliefs of us not feeling lovable, not feeling deserving, right? Of us not being worthy or loved enough. And as these beliefs bubble up, we find ourselves awash in this sea of negativity. And when we are in that place, when we are in that triggered state, our unhappiness, our dissatisfaction, right, our displeasure with the moment, right, skews our worldview. All of a sudden now, our view of our relationship and the current situation totally changes. And you might notice at those times the experience that all of a sudden, like your entire relationship sucks. Not only that, but your entire relationship has always sucked. It's always been awful. It's always had these issues, always had these problems. And you might even begin to question, if you really go all the way down sort of the negative tunnel, you'll find yourself beginning to question the relationship, questioning the goodness of your decision to choose to be in relationship with this person. And we really do get sucked in to a negative complaint loop as we begin to keep generalizing this experience out to encompass other times when we felt similarly. When we are concerned about, when we begin to question the relationship, is also when we're beginning to project that same negative patterns right into the future. So not only has it always been this way, it's this way now, it's also always going to be this way, right? And so that negative thinking, those negative stories that we get caught up in, definitely affect our view of the current relationship. When we are in that place where we've got all of this negativity running around, we're jumping to the past, to the present, to the future, kind of projecting out this horrible experience, continuing on into the future. We're usually also really believing that things aren't going to change, that it's going to stay this way unless we rear up our rear up and fight for what we really want. So when we're in those reactive states, we of course want to share what we're seeing and what we're experiencing with the people that we love, right? And so we want to communicate the connections that we're making between the past and the present and the future. We want to express our fears. We want to express our concerns. We want to express our desires. Now, as we do that, there are many ways we might go about this. So, for some of us, we just focus in on our current relationship. We have enough ammunition and evidence to just look back far enough, a year or two here to gather evidence for how this person has never kept their word, all the other times when they said things and didn't follow through. And for some of us, we might even go back to previous relationships and begin to see, wow, I always pick people who don't keep their word. Like, it's not only you, it was also George and Helen and, like all these other people I've been in relationship with who also didn't keep their word. Some of us, when we're really steeped into making connections, we might even go all the way into our past or all the way into our childhood past, where we begin to make connections between what we're experiencing in our relationship with what we witnessed in our family as we were growing up. So we might even say something, like, wow, I'm actually seeing that my mom, was in relationship with my dad, who also never kept his word. And wow, I'm repeating the same thing my mom did of putting up with and sort of kind of filling in the gaps of where her husband didn't do what he said he was going to do either. Now, when we are sharing these insights and all these connections that we're making, especially when we're in a triggered state, you might notice that we're not exactly doing it in the most productive way. It usually comes across to our partners as being blaming and criticizing. And, when we're in these triggered states of unhappiness, our partners are definitely picking up on our angry, hurt, disappointing, disapproving mood. And that, unfortunately, doesn't really make things any better either. And that kind of throws your partner into having a whole bunch of triggered responses as well. So we'll talk more about that here in a moment. Now, the problem with bringing up the past, actually there's several, but one of them that we'll be talking about here in this moment, and we'll add on a couple as we go along here, is when you bring up the past and you have all of these other examples of where you have felt similarly, and when you are as well projecting what is going on into the future and your concern and fear that it's always going to continue being this way as well, you are no longer focused on the one problem that is presenting itself at this moment. So I'm going to say that again because it's really important. You're no longer focused on the one issue or problem at the moment. The one that's rearing its head right now, the one that wants to be addressed right now. You're now in this process of generalizing and focusing in on and bringing in the past. You now have a lot of irons in the fire, not just the one issue that wants to be dealt with and addressed in this moment. Not only that, but your focus shifts away from productive solution discovery, right? You're not now looking for answers to this issue at hand. What can we do right now to make things better, to resolve this issue right now, right? And the steps you can take to resolve those conflicts. You are instead focusing more in on the problem, more on the complaint, more on what you don't like, more on what isn't working, more on what you don't like. And unfortunately, and you might have heard this before, right? Where we put our attention is where energy goes. We feed with our attention wherever we put our focus. So when our focus is on the problem and how it's always been this way and it's always going to keep being this way, then we keep reinforcing that experience for ourselves. And that is, again, one of the dangers of bringing up the past and generalizing, is it keeps our focus on the problem and off of the solution. The other problem with generalizing and bringing up the past is that it reinforces your sense of powerlessness and stuckness. When you generalize, you effectively blow your problem up to unfixable proportions. So think about that, right? If I have always had this issue and it still is here and it's not changing and it's likely to be here forever, when I am in that way of thinking about this problem, it's huge, it's big. I've got the past to deal with, I got the present to deal with, I got the future to deal with. This is a big problem. This is a big issue. And when I blow it up to that degree, it becomes unfixable because I cannot in this moment fix the past, fix the present, and take care of the future and ensure that it's never going to happen again. I can't do all of that in this moment. And because I can't do all of that in this moment, I literally feel powerless and stuck. And it reinforces the sense of despair and upset rather than making it less intense and moving towards resolution and feeling good. I'm now reinforcing myself feeling bad, feeling hopeless. As I am generalizing, not only that, but I'm adding weight to a whole bunch of negative stories I have about myself, about you, about life, about relationship. I am basically caught up in a whole bunch of negative beliefs that have been reactivated, and I am running those through my mind. And again, same thing, right? The quality of our relationship is the quality of our stories. And so when I'm running a whole bunch of negative stories about you and our relationship and how it's always going to be, we got a pretty crummy relationship. And it makes it very hard to come up with workable solutions in this moment when I'm running a whole bunch of negative stories about us. So when I get caught up here in these general loops of negativity and complaint, I'm going to feel more and more powerless, more and more victimized, because all of this evidence I'm gathering is basically proving to myself that this current situation is unworkable and unfixable. Now, not only do I feel powerless when I'm in this kind of reactive state in the middle of a fight or an argument, but I have my partner feel powerless too, especially when I'm all too willing to share all of the connections that I'm making and how this has always been an issue and always been a problem and probably always is because this person is always like that. When I communicate that, I am basically transferring my sense of powerlessness over there onto my partner. Because when my partner feels negatively characterized or pigeonholed or blamed, especially when I'm bringing up all this past stuff, they also are going to feel powerless about how to deal with this huge issue that is blown up out of perspective, right? They also are unable in that moment to take care of everything from the past and everything that's going on right now, as well as ensuring that it's never going to happen again in the future. So your partner is going to also feel powerless. And when they hear your negatively biased view of them or your recollections of the past, they're going to get defensive because they're going to want to correct your perception, right? By blasting you with all the evidence they have to the contrary, right? They're going to want to prove their side of the story, their perspective. They're going to want to defend their own character, defend who they are. And in the process of their defense and their resistance to your current stories and your current interpretations, and you're bringing in the past and all of these generalizations and negative characterizations and assertions, they are also going to be reluctant to hear you. They're not going to want to listen to your concerns. They're going to be too defensive and too caught off guard to want to be able to really sink down and listen to what it is you're really experiencing, to hear your pain, to hear your concerns, to be open to requests, or to work with you to create some kind of win-win solution to the presenting issue. It really is a recipe for pointless arguing, and it generally takes people, down the rabbit hole of negativity. So, what to do instead? I mean, I could spend more time here on this whole generalizing thing, but I think you kind of get the point, which is that anytime you blow something up into talking in general about patterns in relationship and begin making connections and start connecting it to your fears and your negative stories, you make whatever is going on right now so big that it really does feel unfixable to you and your partner. And from a certain point of view, this big pattern is unfixable. But the current issue that's going on right now is absolutely fixable. So you've got to get it down into specifics. And I'll tell you, that is the one thing I do when I work with couples that produces the biggest positive result, is to set aside all of the patterns and the generalizations and all of the fears and all of the concerns, to set them aside and to actually deal with the specific issue that is in front of you right now. And to keep your focus on this specific issue, on the specific problem at hand, until you work it through all the way to completion. You keep your focus on this particular issue until you work it all the way through to completion. I'm going to show you here how to do that here in a moment. But I want to emphasize that working through issues and problems, coming up with quality problem-solving win-win solutions only happens when we break things down into specifics, into specific steps, into something you can actually shift right now, something you can do or say or think differently right now that's going to produce a different outcome. So here's an example of how we recommend you do that. And it really can be a challenge because, again, the mind wants to rush to these generalities. But the second we do, we take ourselves out of the place where we need to be for resolving conflict. So even if you catch yourself in the middle of it, of generalizing and bringing up the past and making these blanket statements of always and never, set that all aside and see if you can bring it back to this specific time and this specific issue. So here's an example of actually something you can say. You know, when you sat down at the dinner table while I was clearing the dishes, I felt so mad and hurt. And what I mean that mean is that you don't care about me, that I have to do everything myself, and that you're above working in the kitchen, that really I'm alone. And what I really want is help to clean up after dinner. I want us to work together. I want to be connected. I want to feel supported. And I want us to actually have this time to have sweet, deep conversation with each other to really connect. Now, what I'm willing to do to that end is to just make a calm request. I'd love to hear what's going on for you that has you not just volunteer to help. You know, if there's something going on in the background for you that I don't know about, that it would help for me to understand. So I'm open to hearing that. And really what I would like is to explore if you'd be willing, you know, what it would take for you to be willing to help clear up the table and get the dishes done after dinner, to do it with me. And I'm wondering, if you'd be willing to do that. And if there are any concerns for you about that, I'd love to hear what those might be and what it might take for you to be a yes to that. So notice in this example that I'm talking just about my experience right now. I'm not bringing up all the other times you didn't help. I'm not bringing up my past from my childhood, right? I'm not blaming you or making you wrong. I'm merely expressing my experience for the moment. I'm even owning the meaning I'm putting to it not happening. I'm taking ownership of what I'm making up about that. And I'm also very clearly going for what it is I'm wanting in a way that grants space for you to be where you are and to be open to listening and hearing where you are until we can work out some kind of win-win scenario. It sounds simple, and it can also be very challenging, especially when the mind is rushing in with all of these examples from the past and all of our fears and concerns about us not being able to get what we want going forward into the future. It can be really challenging to keep talking about this moment. But I tell you, the more skilled you can get at that, the more hope you feel, because relationship changes happen in these moments of now and now and now. And when changes are made around these specific issues as they go along now and now and now, we begin to feel hopeful as we see these changes begin to play out in our relationships. And the more we can, with these little new agreements or patterns we come up with that we begin to step into, the more we can acknowledge those, the more we can really appreciate those little progresses along the way, the more we get to feed this new possibility for us that we really can create what we want in relationship, that we really do make good choices, that we really are moving together in partnership to come up with ways to best take care of each other's conflicting needs and concerns, that change really is happening and is possible. If there is, so I just want to encourage that, first of all, like just as much as possible, stay away from bringing up stuff from the past, even if your mind is going there. You just, what comes out of your mouth is just talking about this particular moment. If there happens to be something from the past that you're incomplete about that keeps rearing up in the face of present day issues and problems, then that is a sign that that issue from the past is incomplete and also needs to get worked on and talked about at some other time. Don't try to talk about it in that same moment, because it's going to get too mixed up and pretty soon you're going to be down the rabbit hole of this whole thing being way too big. But definitely come back around to it. I notice I keep thinking about this thing that happened on our camping trip in our 3rd year of marriage, and I notice I still have a lot of hurt and anger about it. And I would love to revisit that and see what it would take to work that through all the way to completion. Would you be willing to do that with me? Would you be willing to listen to that? And then you just do the same exact process around whatever it is that happened before. On that camping trip, wow, when that happened, I felt this, and really what I had that mean is, and really what I wanted. And if I could do it all over, this is what I would do differently. This is what I would have loved. And I'd love to hear more what was going on for you about that, if there's anything you want to say. And you stay in there until apologies are offered, amends are made, do-overs are played out, until you are left feeling completely heard, completely healed, and complete. So if that comes up for you and it's challenging to work something through all the way to completion, make sure you get support. Come see Christian or I or some other professional that can help walk you through those specifics until you get it all the way healed, so that it doesn't get re-stimulated the next time you have a similar breakdown. So that's the main message for today, is really play with that. Play with avoiding generalizations. Be as specific as possible. If stuff from the past comes up, deal with it at a separate time and really work everything all the way through to completion. I will tell you that once you develop this skill, it is so much easier to work through problems together as cooperative partners, to work through things all the way through to completion. And I'll just say from my own experience with Christian and I, where we do this, we only deal with what's going on in the moment, and we work it all the way through until there is nothing left about that particular issue. Sometimes we really do do-overs, like we play out in our minds, right? Replaying that situation with a whole set of words and behaviors, and we redo it in a way that we would have liked, so that now we have that redo, that do-over as a memory that's in our mind that we can use to support us in navigating and creating changes in the moment. And every time we do that, Christian and I actually have never had to have the same fight twice. We actually hardly ever fight, because we really are good at working through things, listening to each other, and doing our best to come up with win-win solutions. And the clean, clear space between us is so delightful. And again, it is so easy when stuff does come up, because all we're dealing with is that. And when we know how to work it all the way through to completion, we can be done with a little snit in 5 minutes. And it's over and done with for forever. So play with that. Avoid generalizations, avoid bringing up the past, avoid saying words like always and never. As much as possible, keep talking about the specific issue at hand, work it all the way through to completion. If you need help with that, come seek us out. And I'll actually say, if you are interested in learning more conflict resolution skills, we actually have a whole course we offer called The Gift of Conflict. It's normally a members-only advanced workshop. Every once in a while, we have seats available that we open up to the public. If you're interested in having a breakthrough for yourself around resolving conflict, that I promise is going to save you tons and tons and tons of hours of processing in the future, you're welcome to contact our office and get yourself registered if we have seats available. Don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions or comments about this or anything else. And here is to fast, easy, fun conflict resolution. We wish that for you and your relationship. All right, blessings and honor to be with you. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Dare to Love podcast with Sonica Tinker and Christian Peterson, co-founders of LoveWorks. And hey, if you found this podcast to be valuable, would you hit the share button and go ahead and share this with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, or wherever your favorite hangouts are. Thanks so much for sharing the love.